Boris Johnson is not going to go without a fight. I believe his allies told the Times a couple of days ago that he had said it would take a tank division to drag him out of Downing Street. If he can cling on, he will. One thing that might get him that is unrelated to that fixed penalty notice is if he has misled the House of Commons. Now, if he has misled the House of Commons, in theory, that is a major, major breach.
Today, we heard the news that MP Neil Coyle has been suspended by the Labour Party after allegations he made racist comments. Political journalist Henry Dyer, who is of British Chinese heritage, has made a formal complaint to the Parliamentary Authority saying Neil Coyle used racial slurs and made him feel uncomfortable at an incident in the Commons bar. Labour have issued this statement. The Labour Party expects the highest standards of behaviour from all our MPs, and we take allegations of this sort very seriously. According to the Chief Whip, he has now suspended the Labour Whip from Neil Coyle pending an investigation. Sarah Jones, Labour Shadow Minister for Housing and Labour MP, of course, is on the line. Sarah, good afternoon.
Hello, I'm Shadow Minister for Policing, actually. But,
someone has already lost their job, Sarah, I promise you that. No, I'm kidding. Apologies for that. Shadow Minister for Policing, Sarah. Before we get on to, of course, the big policing news surrounding the resignation of Dame Cressida Dick, I just wanted to get a quick comment from you on that news that your colleague Neil Coyle has had the whip removed pending an investigation.
Yes, well, we expect, as the statement that you just read out said, we expect the highest standards. These are serious allegations, so action's been taken. There's going to be an investigation. That's exactly the right thing to do.
Also, do you care to offer any more comments on the Daily Mail's reporting that in the same evening, Neil Coyle again launched an angry and expletive-laden anti-Brexit rant in the Strangers Bar, one of his colleagues. Is that also behaviour that should be looked into?
Well, I think he's been suspended and the investigation is taking place. I don't know the ins and outs of what the investigation will be, but he has been suspended from the whip, and that is the right thing, and there will be an investigation, and that's absolutely right. We have to expect high standards. We've had such shocking behaviour over recent months from the news of all the different parties that have happened in Number 10. It's incredibly important that the Labour Party is seen to have the highest standards.
OK. Let's move on to the resignation of Dame Cressida Dick as Met Police Commissioner. Your thoughts on that, your reaction, particularly since the quick turnaround. We heard Dame Cressida Dick saying that she was the right person for the job to turn the Met Police around, and then seems hours later she was giving out her statement that she was stepping down from the role.
Well, I think the Mayor of London was absolutely right to demand change and to demand, reform in the Metropolitan Police. We've had a series of reports and inquiries and incidents that have built up over the last year and a bit. We've had the murder of Sarah Everard and the issues around Wayne Couzens. We've had Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman and the horrific use of photos of their bodies. We've had the inquiry into Stephen Port, who murdered 4 young men, and some of those murders could have been avoided if police action had been better. We've had the long-standing case of Daniel Morgan and the institutional corruption that was found within that inquiry, and then the report last week into Charing Cross, which I don't know about you, but were some of the most horrific things I've read. It was completely beyond belief that people would say those things in the police service. So I think what happened is that the Mayor of London felt in the end that he had lost confidence in Cressida Dick's ability to lead that change. But I do think it's really important to say 2 things. One is that we thank her for what she's done. She's been decades in the police service and she's done some good things. And the second important point is that this isn't just about the Metropolitan Police. There are cultural problems across the police service. There have been cases of inappropriate WhatsApp messages that have, over the last year or 2, that we've seen across the country. So the government need to grip this problem now and say, what are we going to do about recruitment, training, making sure we're training the right leaders of these very difficult police services that are so complex. Crime is so complex now. We need absolutely top-ranking experts who can lead an organisation as well as understand policing. So we need to look at all of those issues, how they use social media, how we make sure whistleblowers are able and feel able to come forward when they have concerns, and what we do about people when there are problems, and how do we make sure they are given the appropriate sanctions and removed, indeed, from the police service when they have done things so wrong.
Do you think the Met Police is fixable? I mean, all the things that you've just mentioned, they are things that, not just recent things, but they're things that have been historically pointed out about the Met Police. Many have said that if you were going to create a police force from the bottom up, if you were going to create a new police force, it wouldn't have the structures that the Met Police has at the moment, because let's not forget a lot of other national policing is attached to the Met Police, such as terrorism, the flying squad, fraud squad, all those bits that are attached to the Met Police. Do you think the Met Police is fit for purpose?
Well, I think that the police service do incredible things every day. We demand a huge amount from them. There are fewer people working in the police service now than there were by 17,000 across the country, fewer than there were in 2010. They have real challenges, and I have absolute faith that they can raise their standards and can do better and want to do better. And we can look at the structures of the organisations. You're right, the nature of crime is changing. If you look now, 14,000 cases of fraud every day. We certainly need to look at how we're policing that online crime. We certainly need to look at how we're policing that, bringing back neighbourhood policing. So we can look at structures and how they work, but I think it's also about who we recruit into the police service, how we train them, how we make sure they behave appropriately, and how the leadership are really clear of the values that we expect from our police service, which is higher, let's face it, than we would expect elsewhere. We want the very best to be in our police, and I have met some fantastic police officers, and I know that they want to see that change too.
Okay. Just before we let you go, I just wanted to get a comment from you. Today in the Times, the most successful Labour Prime Minister, Sir Tony Blair, commented on Sir Keir Starmer. He said, he was quoted as saying, he is a work in progress. What do you make of Tony Blair's comments there?
Well, I haven't seen those comments, I'm afraid, but Keir Starmer, I think through the leadership he's been showing, going to try and support the diplomacy and the work that's been going on with NATO over Ukraine and Russia, the leadership he's shown in rooting out anti-Semitism in the party, and the plan that we now have going forward of how we would support the cost of living problems that people are facing, how we would look to improve the economy going forward. He has a plan. He is leading a very united party, and the polls are showing that the public are looking at Keir Starmer and thinking, here is a good, solid, decent man. And goodness, what a contrast to Boris Johnson.
Do you welcome contributions from former Prime Minister Sir Tony Blair, or does every time he has a contribution to the conversation, is it problematic for the Labour Party?
It's not problematic at all. I mean, he leads the Tony Blair Institute, which does some really interesting policy work, actually, on policing and crime. They've done some really interesting pieces of work, which I absolutely welcome. There will always be plenty of people who will comment on how the Labour Party is doing. You know, our priority is to get into power so we can start fixing some of the problems created by this government.
OK. Sarah Jones, Labour Shadow Minister for Policing, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Times Radio political correspondent Charlotte Ivers is in here in the studio with me. You were listening to what Sarah had to say. What did you make of it?
Well, I always think it's wonderful when government ministers and opposition shadow ministers alike come on air and they just haven't seen any of the difficult news stories. She hadn't seen the story reported in the Daily Mail about Neil Coyle and that expletive-written Brexit rant, of course, her colleague. She also hadn't seen Tony Blair's intervention criticising Keir Starmer, or at least saying he's not ready. So that was a real shame, but at least she did have something to add on both of those topics.
She did. Now let's look at the rest of the week of politics. Here's a quick reminder of what's happened so far.
I have absolutely no intention of going. I believe that I am leading a real transformation.
I'm not satisfied with the Commissioner's response.
It is quite clear that the Mayor no longer has sufficient confidence in my leadership of the Metropolitan Police Service for me to continue as Commissioner.
And lies are just not acceptable. To imply otherwise is to cheapen public life.
If he went out, kicked a dog, I'd probably withdraw my support for him. But no, based on, his professional delivery for the UK, no, absolutely not.
He is known as the Member of Parliament for the 18th century, and I think would probably antagonise most people given an opportunity.
I am the Sudocrem to his nappy rash.
Разочарован тем, что разговор немого с глухим у нас получается.
We are going to be talking about that last comment in Russian. I think we are going to be unlocking what that meant. In case you were wondering who was talking about kicking a dog and what that was about, that was Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries being interviewed on an American news network. And they asked her, under what circumstances would she withdraw her support for the Prime Minister? And there you have it, kicking a dog.
Yes, Nadine Dorries, probably Boris Johnson's most loyal lieutenant. That's why you'll have seen her out on the broadcast media quite so frequently recently. I'm not sure if I can tell you this. I probably can tell you this. It's me that wrote it. In not this week, but next week's Sunday Times magazine, I have done a very long interview with Nadine Dorries. I probably can't tell you what it's in it, but it will be a good read if I say so myself. She's a fantastic person to interview. She's a lot more straight talking than most politicians.
So you sat down with her face to face and sort of
face to face. She was absolutely charming. We had a lovely time, and then I saw her on the BBC getting furious with an interviewer for asking her pretty much the same questions. So I tried to get to grips with that in the piece. That's probably my own moral crisis of how on earth that happened. Is probably a reason to read it if nothing else.
Oh, I can't wait, Charlotte. I can't wait. Well, look, let's dig in what happened this week. I suppose big sort of shocking news when it comes back to Partygate as two bits of information. One is 50 people have been sent letters, questionnaires, if we like, from the Metropolitan Police that they have to fill in. And of course, there was that other picture on Wednesday of Boris Johnson from that same party quiz, but this time there was a bottle of fizz.
There was indeed. This is the Christmas Zoom quiz. Now, this is one of the, I would say, lesser parties in the canon of parties that we've all become familiar with. This was Boris Johnson conducting a Zoom quiz from his office with a couple of other people with him, probably more than a couple actually, given we've now seen two different photos with extra people in them. And then what happened was staff were meant to go home or just sit at their desks and do the quiz by themselves, but it seems to be the case that they all gathered in their own little rooms and had teams. And therefore, as a result of that picture, the Met are reassessing whether they are not going to investigate that particular event. So that is another addition to Boris Johnson's list of worries.
And those 50 letters, and do we know if one of those letters is heading for the Prime Minister's inbox?
One of those letters is heading for the Prime Minister's inbox. The Times reports this morning that Boris Johnson is going to be responding to one of those, and also that he is going to get himself a private lawyer. The understanding the Prime Minister has, apparently, is that he may be able to wiggle out of this through some sort of loophole due to the fact that Downing Street is both his house and his place of work. How that works exactly, you'd have to ask a significantly better lawyer than me.
Yes. And I wonder what you made of political commentators pointing out that Labour and other opposition parties have made a lot about, we played a clip earlier of Robert Huck saying, look, if ministerial code has been broken, will the Prime Minister resign? A lot of politicians and MPs have stood up in the House and said, if the Prime Minister gets a fixed penalty notice, will he resign? Now, what do you make of this? That a lot of people have said, well, by putting so much focus on whether a Prime Minister does or does not get a fixed penalty notice, it does open the door for the Prime Minister that if he doesn't get a fixed penalty notice, then he sort of has met the threshold to stay in power. And yet, Partygate is more than who gets a fixed penalty notice or not. It's more about general rule breaking, what Sue Gray said, lack of leadership, general rule breaking inside Number 10.
So I would say there is always that possibility. I would add as well that the Prime Minister has absolutely not made a commitment that if he does get fixed penalty notice, he will go. And actually, I think we could see a lot of Conservative MPs backing down from their claims, in private mainly. I imagine the ones who've gone on the record publicly will be different, that Boris Johnson would have to resign if he gets one of these fixed penalty notices. I can very much see a world in which they say, right, he has faced the punishment, he has done the time, I suppose would be the terminology we'd use, and therefore we all need to move on with things. Boris Johnson is not going to go without a fight. I believe his allies told the Times a couple of days ago that he had said it would take a tank division to drag him out of Downing Street. If he can cling on, he will. One thing that might get him that is unrelated to that fixed penalty notice is if he has misled the House of Commons. Now, if he has misled the House of Commons, in theory, that is a major, major breach of the ministerial code. But again, who is the ultimate arbiter of the ministerial code? Boris Johnson.
Isn't that where we've got to now? That we have Parliament running on things like agreements, time-old agreements that people will behave in a certain way, but nothing is forced on ministers. They're not forced to step down if they've misled the House, and we are dealing with a completely different style of government. Let's also look at the resignation of Cressida Dick. Of course, that was big news yesterday. Priti Patel, it was reported in the Times today, was pretty furious that she was blindsided by the London Mayor.
Yes, the London Mayor has some role in the appointment of the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, but then the actual authority behind the appointment comes from the Home Secretary. So in theory, it should have been the Home Secretary to fire Cressida Dick if anyone was going to. Of course, she didn't actually really get fired. She lost the confidence of Sadiq Khan and then made her own choice in that light to step down. So in a way, Priti Patel has sort of been slightly circumvented there. Having said that, I get the sense that actually there was more awareness in the Home Office of what was about to happen than perhaps first meets the eye. I would say as well, probably if you were Priti Patel, you would not want to be the person actually wielding the knife in this case, given, of course, that the government are currently, well, not quite the government, but Downing Street are under investigation by the Metropolitan Police. You wouldn't want, if you're Priti Patel, to be accused of taking vengeance on Cressida Dick or indeed of trying to influence the outcome of that investigation.
And is there going to be a lot of political bartering between the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, and London Mayor Sadiq Khan on the appointment of the next Commissioner of the Met Police? Because I believe Sadiq Khan does have a role to play in that appointment. Or could the Home Secretary completely ignore his wishes and appoint whoever she wants?
The Home Secretary appoints the new Metropolitan Police Commissioner, but she has the legal obligation to take into account Sadiq Khan's opinion, or, of course, whoever the incumbent Mayor of London is. Now, that is broadly phrased. So in theory,
she can ignore it.
She probably does need to balance it out properly and take it into account. But of course, it is her decision in the end. And both Sadiq Khan and Priti Patel have been quite sceptical, I should say, of the Metropolitan Police. They are not huge fans of the way it's being currently run. But beyond that shared assessment, they really do have very, very different views of the way that policing should be done in the capital. So I think this could be quite a tricky political decision. Having said that, there are obvious people who could be the next Met Police Commissioner. We're looking at the assistant commissioners, for example. Someone like Neil Basu would be an obvious choice. So it could also be the case that you see an interim head put in place while this wrangling takes place.
Yes. Last story for us to deal with, Sergei Lavrov, which was the final piece that you heard in our montage there. He sort of dismissed Liz Truss in their meeting. He said it was like talking to a deaf person. I think, is there a danger that something's been lost in translation? Because the full quote I heard is like a deaf person trying to communicate with a mute person. This may be some sort of Russian phrase that we're not familiar with, but the idea that they were both on a different page. They weren't really understanding each other.
Certainly, it does seem to be the case that those talks were not hugely successful. I have to say, I'm not sure anyone went into them particularly expecting there to be some sort of major breakthrough. And clearly, this is going to be a case of stick rather than carrot when it comes to the international community's response. So you've got Ben Wallace Mattis, the Defence Secretary, heading out today to join Liz Truss. And with him, he is bringing a huge package of potential sanctions if Russia were to invade Ukraine. Those sanctions are wider ranging than any we have seen before in this type of circumstance. They would be applicable to anyone who has any sort of economic link with the Russian government, not just state actors themselves. And they would also be quite heavily targeted towards industries that are vital to the economic well-being of Russia. So we're talking things like transport, we're talking things like the chemical industry, like the energy industry. That is clearly going to be where the realpolitik is on this, rather than on warm or not so warm words at a press conference.
Also, Charlotte, I suppose we should take into account that it was beneficial for both of them for this meeting, for them to both come out looking strong, for him to sort of dismiss Liz Truss, and for Liz Truss to be holding her own and saying, well, I'm sticking to my guns. I mean, it was never going to be one of those press conferences where they were going to look at each other across the podium, smile and say, oh, we can work this out.
No, it never was. And a lot of diplomacy, when conducted in public, is, of course, theatre, I think, particularly when it comes to the Russian state. So I'm not sure we saw anything hugely surprising yesterday, but obviously this situation is still ongoing. It is still on the brink, really.
There was that clip of they finished their news conference and he just sort of walked off, leaving Liz Truss to sort of, pack up her notes and sort of follow him. And of course, it all came a cropper, that piece of theatre of him walking off, because they both had to wait for each other for the door to open, because they both were exiting from the same door.
Yes, and they were going for lunch together afterwards. So again, it's all theatre, this type of thing. It's not all theatre, but a lot of what is presented to us is theatre in these cases.
Of course. Charlotte, as always, thanks for coming in and giving us all your time.
Thank you.
Charlotte Ivers there, political correspondent for Times Radio. Now, it is 2:27 and it's time for this.
Anger and brief sadness en road, followed by expression of surprise as knight meets queen. 9-6. It's Crossword Corner. Work it out.
Yes, that's right. It's that time of the week where we engage our little grey cells and try to solve a weekly topical cryptic clue from the world-famous Times crossword team. And today's clue is set by the Times crossword editor, Richard Rogan. Richard, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Alexis. How are you?
I'm very well. All the better for speaking to you, Richard. I'm always looking forward to my crossword clue. Never solved it yet, but my humiliation continues.
You'll get it today. I'm absolutely confident you'll get it today, Alexis.
I really hope so. Pens and papers at the ready, everybody. Richard, take it away. What's our clue this week?
Okay, so today's clue is as follows. Put out promise. This to be continued by Alexis on radio, ? And it's 2 words, 9 and 6. Do you want me to do that again?
Oh, yes, please.
Right, put out promise, imagine a little colon after that, this to be continued by Alexis on radio, ? And it's 9 and 6.
I love the fact that I've made the clues 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, you have,
yes, it makes me very, very giddy, Richard. If you think you know the answer, you've got the half-hour headlines and the sport, which is about 5 to 6 minutes to work out the answer and text it in or tweet it in. You could text in 87222, start your message with the word Times, followed by your answer, or you could tweet us at Times Radio. And Richard is going to stay on the line and he's going to give us the clue. And for all those newbies out there, he's also going to explain how you get from the clue to the answer, because a whole part of this is to show people how cryptic crossword clues are just brilliant, and you should try one every day, or you should do the whole puzzle every day. Richard, stay where you are. It is time now to get our half-hour headlines and sport. But I'll give the clue one more time for those of you asking. It is put out promise, : this to be continued by Alexis on radio, ? 2 words, 9-6. If you think you know it, text 87222, start your message with the word Times, tweet us at Times Radio. Here's Cara Bentley with your half-hour headlines and sport.